when he was on with you, it was quite apparent that you are an actual expert in the Bible and in many religious texts, and that he didn't necessarily have the facts straight. So what was the fallout of all of that?
Well, it's interesting you say the expert thing, because
the fallout was that the dude was embarrassed.
I literally was asked to do it 24 hours beforehand. So I had like the least amount of preparation going into it. And I was okay with that because I'd listened to Billy Carson. Well, and I listened to the stuff he'd said. So I knew enough about the ways that he'd articulated things about the ancient Near East and the Bible and Christianity to know enough that his level is pretty surface. But the fallout was that not only did he not want us to release the conversation, but then he started throwing out cease and desist letters. And then he started, trying to sue people. So, I mean, I was never worried because I'm a Canadian. And anybody who's tried to sue internationally knows that...
Good luck.
Yeah, right. Yeah. As far as I understand it, he would have had to file a claim in a Canadian court that would have been reviewed to have legal precedence. He'd have to prove that he could win.
What was his argument?
It was very unfortunate for him because ultimately maybe he could have scared somebody that was in the U.S., but because he was in Canada, I mean, look at it. He wasn't sweating it at all.
Apart from the fact that he was embarrassed that he lost?
Well, yeah, that's not really an argument, right?
Well, the cease and desist letter, the cease and desist letter said, I don't want you to use my name or my face in anything going forward, and anything you've used up until this point you need to remove. And I was given 24 hours notice to do this.
But if you're a public figure, he's clearly a public figure. Is that even, can you actually say? No,
you can't do it.
So what was does he have a lawyer that wrote the cease and desist? Is he a lawyer?
No. So it's interesting because Mark Menard, who was the guy who hosted this interaction, he sent Mark a handwritten one, and then he eventually gave Mark an official one from his lawyer. So I actually was sent...
Man, this dude was so worried that he couldn't wait to get in touch with his lawyer. He had to send one by hand.
One by his lawyer, which I, screenshotted, posted publicly online and said, I'm going to...
You ever done something and immediately regretted it right after? I can imagine that's how he felt as soon as he got a little bit of time once he got home to realize, oh crap, I was destroyed. I looked terrible. He was just like, I need to try to put a stop to this any way that I can.
I'm going to ignore this. And then, but he'd sent Mark, who was the podcast host, as far as I'm aware, numerous cease and desists, and Anton, who was the media manager. He'd sent a number of cease and desists.
It's unfortunate.
It is unfortunate.
When you get caught with your pants down, you're supposed to say, I got caught with my pants down.
Yeah.
That's what you're supposed to do. It's the only, especially if you're public. It's very clear that you're incorrect.
Well, the irony of the situation is if he just kind of left it, it probably wouldn't have made anywhere close to the splash that it's made. And we told him that. Yep. We said, hey, Barbra Streisand effect is going to happen.
Yeah.
You're a big enough personality that if I make a video and say, hey, I had this conversation, didn't go well for Billy, and Billy doesn't want it released, that's going to start to gain traction sooner or later.
Yeah. It's, the problem is to really delve into these subjects. It takes a tremendous amount of research, years and years and years of research. You really have to know what you're talking about. Most of us don't.
Well, and especially with languages.
Yes.
We didn't get into it. I hoped to have, in our initial conversation, kind of press him a little bit more on the more overt things he'd said about Greek and Hebrew and Sumerian, because I've studied a number of ancient languages, and when you study the languages, you realize the complexities of these things. And so when someone hasn't, and they're making statements that are obviously indicative of someone who hasn't studied them, it's super apparent.
Right.
And so I think it's one thing to be making claims about, say, Christian history or the Bible, but when you start to get into linguistics and philology, it gets messy. And if you don't know what you're talking about, it gets really apparent really fast.
So the gentleman who brought the two of you together, what was his goal? What was he trying to do, and how did he approach you?
Yeah, so he's friends, or I should say was friends. He was friends with Billy. They live in the same neighborhood.
Oh, boy.
So it's actually become really, it's become pretty rough for him. So he released a video yesterday, which I think people should go and check out, where he kind of gives his perspective. He's been friends with Billy for years. He was at Billy's wedding. Oof. Billy had 15 people at his wedding.
Oof.
Mark was one of them. And they live in this community in Florida. Their sons are friends.
Dude, you would have thought if this person was your friend, maybe in talking to him, you could have figured something out where maybe this thing would have not blown up the way that it did.
Their wives would hang out.
Oof.
And Mark told me he's like, I've been hearing Billy say, he wants to debate, nobody will debate him for years. And so as far as I think Mark was concerned, he was giving Billy the opportunity that Billy had told a lot of people he wanted.
Right.
And so he, this was set up in that Mark and Billy have been talking. They've been on each other's podcasts in the past, and they've been friends, but more like business colleagues. Like Mark has come out and said, I hadn't really gone into the stuff he'd said about Christianity or ancient religions or whatever that much. Mark he's a Christian. He has like a public profession of faith, and him and Billy had talked about the fact that they wanted to talk about like faith stuff and some of their differences, and that that Mark was kind of prepping for this, and his media manager Anton had sent him some of my stuff and said like, Wes has done some stuff on some things that Billy has talked about, and maybe you should look up some of this stuff, read into it. And Mark, very last minute, was like, well, I feel inadequate. Do you think I could just ask Wes? And so he DM'd me on Instagram and just kind of laid this out like, hey, I'm going to have Billy in my studio in 24 hours. I can tell him you're coming. I can tell him who you are. I can like give him your background. But would you be willing to come? And so that's what I did. And so that's how it got set up.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but was Billy aware that this was going to be a debate, or did he think it was going to be just a discussion? Like, what did he think it was going to be?
I mean, I don't even think that it was really a debate. It seemed like it was just a discussion, some back and forth. I just think everyone's calling it a debate because it went so bad for him,
No, he'd been given all of the prerequisites. Like he knew we're going to go over some of his stuff that he'd said about Christianity, that I was going to come in, who I was, what my name was, some of my background, and that part of the conversation was going to be me kind of asking him some clarifying questions and rebutting some of the things that he said. So you didn't watch the 3-hour live stream that he did you?
I watched chunks of it.
Okay.
I watched a little bit. I'm like, oof, and then I shut it off. Then I watched a little bit more. Oof.
Yeah. So unfortunately, Billy there says he had no idea going in. And I mean, as Mark said in his video that he released yesterday, I mean, that's patently false. He knew what it was going to be, who was going to be involved, and even some of the things that we would be talking about.
Okay. And he also was claiming that it wasn't a debate, that he had been involved in debates before and that he would prepare for debates, but this is something he didn't prepare. But again, it's like if you ask me about things that I know about, you can wake me up out of a full sleep and give me a couple seconds. I'll go, oh, okay, this is what it is.
Yeah.
And if you know, you know.
And it wasn't a debate in one sense. Like, it wasn't. Like, we didn't do opening statements and cross-examination and rebuttal.
Right.
It really was a conversation.
Right.
And it only kind of turned into a debate in the sense that Billy, I think, got caught out. And so the things that were talked about kind of showed that, that he needed to go on the offense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, again, it's all very unfortunate. But the good part of it is I was introduced to you and your work. And
there you go.
Very, very extensive and very fascinating. And the videos that you sent me on Instagram, I watched both of those today as well.
Awesome.
So really,
it's unfortunate for Billy because I really do feel like if he would have approached the entire thing with a bit more humbleness, with a humble approach, I think it would have gone better for him. He could have just said, hey, like, I felt like it turned into a debate. I wasn't quite prepared. Thinking about maybe doing another interaction with Wes. I think that if that's how he would have framed it, I feel like people would have had a lot more grace. And ultimately, I don't think it would have blown up the way that it did. But when he put out that video, when he started lying, when he started suing people, like, that's when it really went south for him. I just think overall, this is a lesson for all of us to just approach everything that we do with humbleness. I mean, the Bible calls us to be humble in general and to be gracious. And I really do think that if this was the approach that he would have taken, I think that it would have gone a lot better for him. And I mean, at this point, he not only has come off as a liar, but he's also just really been looked at as a charlatan in general, unfortunately. I'm really excited to see the rest of this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. And as always, just want to remind you that we must persevere. Peace.